Hi, everybody. Ed Bixby here from Spotlight Now. Today I'm here with Daniel Holland from Boundless Natural Organic Reduction. Dan is the founder and president of Boundless NOR and has a long and varied business background, having been employed in or volunteered in or operating businesses in banking and the credit union industry, including mortgage lending, real estate appraisal, brokerage development, construction, property management, and property tax administration. Dan is currently a frontline manager in state equalization within property tax administration. Now in his 10th year as a field operations section manager for the Michigan Department of Treasury, Dan has founded several companies and has served as president, treasurer, secretary, and board member of several nonprofit and for-profit and ecclesiastical organizations. Dan's newest venture, Boundless, is the relatively new area of natural organic reduction within our death care industry. Boundless is not yet open for business to the public and is working to make NOR legal as it is in 12 other states. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you, and hopefully we can get you some support there in Michigan because you're doing good work. So Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you got involved in the world of eco-friendly funeral options and why Boundless was created?
So, because of my background, I was working with my daughter and son-in-law on developing a duplex for them to build and live in. And then in 2000, when prices were going up, or 2020, excuse me, when prices were going up and then we got into the COVID era, I had to go to them and say, you know, we can't do this at this point in time. Prices are all over the place. There's too much uncertainty. And that made me sad because they were really interested. They were learning a lot. I'm at the age where I'm trying to give back to others in my life, whether it's family or friends or just people that I meet. And they were really learning a lot about real estate and development investments and how to get ahead in life financially. And at that same time, I was learning from them. And one of the things I was learning was how to be resourceful. And as we were going through this planning process and actually developing the plans for the duplex, I learned from my son-in-law that about YouTube and how much you can learn off YouTube. So I got a subscription and I started watching different videos. And the first thing I thought was, well, I don't know anything about farming. I've been a city guy all my life. So as I was watching farming videos, it kept coming up to how they're handling mortalities on farms. And I learned about static pile, and then I learned about static pile aeration. And while I'm watching these, I'm thinking we should be doing this with humans instead of, I kind of look at things sometimes differently than a lot of people. And as I'm going through a cemetery, like the cemetery where most of our family is buried over by Westphalia in Michigan, I can see that we have done things wrong with the way we planned our cemeteries. If we look at years ago, I worked for the city of Kentwood, and right behind the city center, there's what was a landfill. And they used to just bring in these 55-gallon drums, put them in the ground, and line them up side by side. There'd be thousands of them, and then they would bury them. No lining underneath. That's what we used to do with landfills. Well, I'm thinking to myself, we should be lining our cemeteries to keep stuff from getting in the groundwater because there's a lot of nasties that can be created if somebody's embalmed and or if somebody is does not have oxygen getting to the body when it's decomposing. These are just things that I think about because of my scientific background from all the classes I've taken and things. So anyways, to make a long story short, is I'm watching these videos and I'm thinking that we should be doing this with humans. One day I was watching a video and the next one that popped up was about recompose in Washington State, and they are doing it with humans. And I was like, oh man, this is cool on one hand, but somebody took my idea because at that point I had already gotten with my son-in-law and said, hey, how about designing a processing vessel like this and joining me in this venture? And when I explained to my daughter and son-in-law what I wanted to do, they were all excited. So they had to give up working on the duplex and all of that. And I should say that as part of that process of planning for the duplex, Dalton had taught himself the architectural software, and it was amazing what he did. And so within like 10 minutes of explaining to him what I was picturing for a processing vessel, he had it all already designed as we were sitting there talking. And I was like, this is going to be a real good partnership, working on this with them. And I've got a lot to give, but what I've learned too is the younger generations, there's so much that we can learn from them, and it's been an exciting process. So as I'm investigating this more and more, I ended up going out to Terracon, which is put on by Return Home. It's a NOR conference out in Tacoma, Washington. And at that time, we weren't really sure that we were going to be able to do this because it is so highly complex. Starting a new business in a new industry when you don't really have a mentor. We can have advisors, right? Somebody that might guide us on accounting or branding or those kind of things, but there's really nobody there to be a mentor that has actually done an NOR processing business. And then based on all of the different businesses I've started over the years and run and been involved with, I knew that this, to be successful, number one, has to work with the funeral industry across the state. It has to be available statewide until it's transferred over to another state. But in Michigan, I want to have this throughout the whole state. And I learned a lot at Terracon. The first time Dalton and I went, and then this last one that they had, I believe, was in November. Sam, my other son-in-law, and Dalton and I went. And every time we go, we learn new things. And what's really impressive to me, Ed, is the community that's growing around this, because this is really pulling at the heartstrings of people. It's allowing, in those states where NOR is being done, it is really allowing for a connection to the family and the friends to help people in their grief and their grieving. A lot of people did not like having to sit in funerals and go up and view an open casket when they didn't understand what's going on. Lots of times, people are up there with their kids, but what they're finding is that the NOR, the laying in process, and then getting the soil, the compost back at the end, and being able to plant a tree and sustain life with that is so valuable to people that, having been to 2 of the Terracon conferences and having worked on this for 3 years now, it's just solidified in my mind that this really is the best option for me and for us in this business, and for the death care industry and for society at large, because it does eliminate, besides being good on the grief and grieving side of things, it's also very good for our environment. So I've been learning a ton, because I had never in my life thought that I'd be doing this, but it's the right thing. And the people that are involved are really, they're really caring, and I'm meeting some really great people. So,
Well, and what you're finding, Dan, is that, ultimately what you've already learned is it is really truly about the celebration and memorialization, the grief process. With a natural burial, with a natural organic reduction, when the family has more of an intimate type of experience where they can care for the loved one, in a way that defines who they were. That's really important. So that's great to hear that you recognize that. And, and I know a lot about natural organic reduction and different operators and different processes. For instance, from Recompose to Walt Patrick at Harlan Forest, who does it very differently. So tell us a little bit about Boundless system and your unique design. What will your natural organic process look like?
well, there's the mechanical side of it at the processing center, but I think it starts before that. It starts with, how do you interact with your community? And the vision that I've had is that it's a very expensive operation, because the equipment and the facilities and the amount of time. If you're talking 6 weeks for a process, that investment is not something that can fit in at the local funeral home. There's just not enough room, there's not enough space, and then you have to have the expertise to put it together. There is a system out there right now that that Seth is selling, but it's expensive when you look at it for the cost per unit. I've always envisioned from the start that the system has to be able to be what I call scalable. And a lot of times people don't understand scalable. So let me give you an example. Right out of college, I started a business and we made popcorn products. And when we would go into a retail shop, let's say a grocery store, to sell our popcorn products, they would look at our price point and they'd go, this won't work, you know? And what I realized was that because we were a small operation, our product was better, but our price point was so much higher than like the Seiferts and the Jays and the Lays and those companies, just because we did not have, we had a labor intensive process. And so I learned a lot about scaling. And what I realized is after the third round of financing in the business, I realized we were not going to be able to get it to scale to compete, and that it didn't work having a product that was 2 to 3 times the cost. So when I look at that for the NOR industry, what I see is a need for those that are professionals dealing with grief and in their local community, the funeral homes, to be a part of this. And so when we looked at designing our vessels and our facility, we took a little bit different approach in that my one son-in-law works for an engineering firm, Sam, and Dalton is an airplane mechanic. The skills and the abilities and what these guys see, it's amazing to me. And so we talked a lot about what scale we needed to be at. And we realized that the scale needs to be out the chute at a point where we can bring the cost way down. So to give you an example, Mein Erde out of Germany has vessels, and they're incredible. They're like the top of the line that I've ever seen in their process, and they're around $40,000 per vessel. When I talked to Seth, he's at about $60,000 a vessel. Well, we've decided to engineer our own vessels. We're currently on about our 5th go around on these vessels, and we've got it refined down now where our costs out of pocket are less than $3,000 for the materials. Now that doesn't include labor and those kind of things, but that should put us at a price point that is significantly lower than anybody else's. So with that, we can scale up and have a processing center. I'm looking at having a processing center out of the chute with 900 vessels, which will allow us to do about 20 a day. 20 a day times for 6 weeks is 900. And the reason that I started with that scale is that there's 8 to 10,000 deaths in Michigan per month on average. Sometimes a little more than 10, sometimes a little less than 8, but generally right in that range. That would put us at 600, which is less than 10%. And I think then that we can build that to scale by working through the funeral industry and having them in their funeral homes do the laying in ceremony. We will also do retail, but that's not going to be our primary emphasis. Our primary emphasis will be working with them in their local communities so that people can be close to home and don't have to travel all over the state. Or right now, there's been people that have gone from Michigan with their loved ones all the way to Washington to have this done. And that's just amazing. I mean, it really tells how much meaning there is in this for people. So we have designed 3 different sizes of vessels. They're metal, and they are set up to process. We've designed it so that as we evolve, we can automate as much of the process as possible to keep the cost down. but we're looking at a facility that will have 900 vessels. Hopefully, we're going to be able to scale it to that in the first phase, and then as it progresses, then we'll add another phase of 900 vessels. That will allow us to keep the cost down, and because if you look at it, at the real competition for NOR is not in-ground burial, it's cremation. Cremation is now over 50% of what goes on, and so we wanted to recognize that. Some of the other companies out of the chute were talking about how in-ground burial is their competition, and they were pricing in order to compete with that, not realizing that they were missing things, and it really is cremation, and cremation is very inexpensive. What really is attractive to people is when they realize that those are not environmentally friendly options, especially when you have a state like Michigan where after 48 hours you end up having to be embalmed. So anyways,
Well, I mean, and I appreciate that explanation because, you're the first person I'm going to give you the props that you deserve. I've been saying for years, Daniel, that what I saw with natural organic reduction was that there was not enough capacity if enough people bought into the concept. And you're talking about, I'm very happy to hear that you're creating a facility that can handle the volume that may, come in, because it is a lengthy process. And you are 100% correct in saying the competition is cremation. You are undoubtedly right in that. So I think you guys are heading in the right direction. And, over the years, I've had a lot of involvement with a lot of the different states and lawmakers when it comes to legalizing this process. And, some states have been very receptive. Some, of course, people are typically fearful of what they don't know. But how have you and your organization approached legalizing this option in Michigan? And where does that conversation currently stand with the lawmakers?
well, Ed, I have not been in a hurry because I realized that in order for me to invest the money that I need into the company to get it through the planning stage, to get the vessels designed and tested, I couldn't be in a hurry because I didn't know what I was doing, quite literally. And I had to pick up little snippets here and there and piece things together. So Sam and Dalton and myself, we've done a lot of research, and it's been good that we've been taking our time because we have not made some of the mistakes that some of the early startups made. And like, for example, we would not have understood the importance of families wanting to be there during that 4 to 6 week period next to the processing vessel. We learned, talking to Micah out at Return Home, that they were surprised the first time, a family said, no, we want to come in. We want to sit here and just be with our loved one. And had we designed the building, I would have had to redesign it because there needs to be room for that, right? We have to allow for what is important to people. We're human beings, and we grieve and we care and we love and we hurt. And each person is different in that regard. I recently took a class trying to prepare myself for this from Northern Michigan University. It's their grief support specialist program. And that was incredibly valuable, learning what we can do as an industry to really help people in their grieving process. And that to me is like one of the most important aspects of this. So oftentimes when people say, well, tell me about your process, I think in the back of my mind, they're asking about, tell me about your vessel and how that works and how the decomposition process works. But in my mind, I'm thinking, whoa, it's way beyond that. There's so much more to it. And now I forgot what your question was.
No. You did answer it. I mean, so I know. So you have been fine tuning your thought process prior to engaging the governmental agencies and getting this put before those individuals. I mean, I believe that, fortunately for you, I think in many ways, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. So a lot of the state lawmakers will probably look to other states and basically say, what are their licensing requirements? And I would hope that it would probably go rather smoothly. Now, what I was thinking when you were talking was, because I know that you're working on a lot of the processes, but this is just something that I was going to ask you, but it appears that you probably are not offering any type of education or outreach at the moment. But I think that if you guys consider that, in the near future, it would be interesting to see how it's perceived by your community. Have you had experience with your communities in Michigan? And I mean, is there a good, let's say, a large desire for the process? Have you gauged that yet?
Well, um, given that I'm still working a full-time job that oftentimes is more than 40 hours, plus trying to do this, it was difficult for me for the outreach side. One of the things that happened 2 years ago when we were at Terracon, I met a lady that was very excited about, her name's Lindsay, and we lost touch. I wrote her email address down wrong, and so we lost touch. But this last year, when we were at Terracon, she got up and she said that she's with NOR for Michigan. And I was like, whoa, this is exciting. There's people in Michigan that are interested in this, because I really didn't out of the chute talk to a lot of people around me about it, because I was still trying to figure out, how do we do this? Are we proprietary in our systems? I really didn't know how much I could talk until I got through the patent stuff and talked to a patent attorney. And but what was so exciting about reconnecting with Lindsay and learning about NOR for Michigan, so that is NOR, the numeral 4 Michigan .org is the website. And she indicated there that they already had 80 people on an email list that said they want this, and they're trying to work to move forward with the legislature. They'd already had conversations with the Michigan Funeral Directors Association, with at least one funeral director who's very involved with them, and other people. And so when I explained to her that we had made the commitment to move forward with this as a business, she was very excited. She asked if I would come in and have a meet and greet with their people. And what happened was, when I was talking further with Lindsay at the conference, she indicated that they did not yet have a website, and I understood they didn't have a petition put together. So, because I know grassroots efforts oftentimes don't have a lot of resources, I just thought, well, I'll get the URL for them, norformichigan.org. I'll build a website. There is a website out there now that we're still refining. It's very rough. And we put together a petition, and that's on change.org/NOR for Michigan. People can go there and show their support by basically signing the petition. The petition is not directly tied to the legislature at this point. It's when we finally get and talk to the legislature, we can say we have this many people in Michigan that have already expressed their interest in this. We pay to support change.org. So when people go on, they don't need to do that. If they want to, they can support change.org. And there's tons of other petitions on there for other different things. But for ours, it's change.org/NOR number 4 Michigan, NOR for Michigan. And so that grassroots effort really took a load off my mind, because it's been so intense just working through things. To give you an example, we set up a metal fabrication shop just to do the testing. We started out with one type of welder, we moved to another type, and now we got a third type of welder. And we've got bending equipment, we got plasma cutters. We're learning, teaching ourselves about, low voltage electric and stepper motors and pneumatics and hydraulics and sensors and relays. It's been amazing the stuff that we've been learning on that side, and that's taken up a lot of our time. So finding people that want to work on this and bring it as a choice. That's basically what we're asking the legislature for, or we'll be asking them eventually, is please just allow this to have this as a choice in Michigan. And so we're trying to refrain from getting down into the weeds on, it's the best environmentally friendly option, those kind of things. Yeah, sure. But we want our families to have the choice, and that's what we're coming together under that big tent umbrella. And that came out of advisement from those that were involved with NOR from Minnesota, and their suggestion is that just keep it a single point focus for legislative intent.
No, I agree with that, and available options. You're starting a conversation. People can look at the available options and they'll make their decisions based upon transparency and the information that they're provided. So I think that's a good strategy. My next question would be, and I think we've already answered some of that. We kind of know that the goal for Boundless with your facility and the services that you anticipate providing. But let me ask you this. What areas do you hope to serve? Will this be strictly Michigan based, or do you see your product going nationwide at some point, with good luck, let's say?
With good luck, what I would like to do is have an investor base that realizes this, and maybe even a public offering where they realize that we have something that is scalable and duplicatable. One of the things that I've always talked about a lot with my kids and others is I do a lot of interaction with people, and I talk a lot about systems and systems approach, and I've just always thought that way all my life. So as I'm building this business, I am building it so that, just to give you an example, for one business, we have 4 business entities, and there's a reason for that. It has to do with liability and a structure so that you can raise capital and so you can scale it. And I have in my mind that if we are successful, and I hope we are, in Michigan, of serving the whole state, the rural areas, the suburban areas, the urban areas, that we can take this model and just duplicate it over into another state. And I hope at that point, what I really want to do, part of this, Ed, is I want to leave a legacy for our community, for different individuals. When I meet people that are really have their hearts in the right place, and although I'm building a scalable business that should be highly profitable, I don't want that to be the primary intent of this. It goes beyond that. I read a book not too long ago that Conscious Capitalism by John Mackey. He was the founder of Whole Foods, and from his writings and what he talks about, I really learned a lot about considering all of the stakeholders when you're looking at doing something. So for a business like this, it is the families, it's the friends, it's everybody that would ever go to a funeral. It is everybody that's involved in death care. It is the doulas. It is the people that even do embalming. It's the guy that comes and empties your trash dumpster. It's your school system. It's your firefighters. It's everybody that is in any way, shape, or form impacted on your business. So as we're building this business plan, we are identifying the stakeholders and making sure that what we do is right for them, for all of them. We ask these questions, and that's the first way. When I mentioned that I was working with my daughter and son-in-law for building a duplex and designing it, and one of the first things before we even got into what is zoning and what are the laws that pertain to building was who's going to be impacted by this. And that was such a learning experience, and I think that's one of the things that's really helped me on this path is stopping and saying, how does this affect people? To give you an example, on our second rendition of our processing vessels, we had designed a system where we could do it outdoors. And my thought was to scale it, if we don't have to have a building, that is that much less investment that's needed, and therefore the price point can be lower. And what I realized, though, is by doing it that way, we were not considering our staff, and that you can't open a vessel once the process is started. Until it is complete, you can't do that because of the trauma that it can cause people to have that happen. We also can't have it so that one of our vessels falls off the shelf and breaks open. There's all these little things that got to be considered. But by building this plan and this business in a way that it is scalable, but also considers all of the stakeholders and the needs for our community, for our churches, for our people that are not of religious faith, for just whatever it happens to be, I think that we will have a product that we can basically copy over into another state, and then another state, and another country, and that's my goal.
Well, that's a great goal to have, Daniel. I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing it right. You're thinking it through. You're not putting the cart before the horse. There's so many people passionate about what we do in the green movement. And like you said, some people aren't seeing the forest through the trees, so you should just take your time. And that sounds like what you guys are doing. So we at the Global Green Burial Alliance would really like to thank you for being here today to explain to our viewers a little bit about what you're working on, what you're working on for Michigan, but it sounds like for the world, really. And we really appreciate that, Daniel. And our viewers can learn more by visiting boundlessnor.com. Daniel, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our viewers before we sign off?
No, just that, Ed, I'm looking forward to learning more about what you're doing and the people that are involved with your organization. I want to say thank you. This has really opened my eyes to how, for one, it's a caring industry, and the people that are involved really care about what they're doing. And I really appreciate that. So thank you for what you're doing.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at the next Spotlight Now.